Hello everyone, hope you're all well and keeping safe in these troubled times. I thought I'd just put up a video, not really about anything, just a general update to keep people kind of informed of what's going on in my little world, and give my viewers something to listen to, maybe, while I know the majority of my subscribers are kind of war gamers, so something to listen to while you're painting along, enjoying your hobby in your self-isolation. Yeah, so interesting times, aren't they? Today, 29th of March 2020, as I'm making this video, I should have been on a train making my way to Heathrow Airport to enjoy my long awaited trip to Jordan, to go on a tour following Lawrence of Arabia's campaign. Alas, obviously, for obvious reasons, that's not going to happen now. Hopefully, I've put it off now till November, and hopefully it will happen there. Who's to say what the state of the travel industry is going to be like in 5 or 6 months' time? Just have to hope things get back to normal. Anyway, one of the things that I have been doing to entertain myself in the absence of that holiday is to read this book, which is actually written by Neil Faulkner, who was going to be the guide on the holiday. And it's a brilliant book, absolutely fantastic book. Not quite what I expected, though, because it actually it doesn't deal entirely with Lawrence of Arabia and the kind of Arab revolt. It actually puts the Arab revolt into the context of the war the Great War in the Middle East in particular. So especially kind of concentrates on the war, the Ottoman attack on Egypt at the beginning of the war, and then the Allied kind of counter-attack, and then Allenby's attacks on Gaza and then Palestine. So it's got the whole gamut of obviously things like the Battle of Beersheba and the light horse, Australian light horse attack on Beersheba. Really interesting book. It never occurred to me. The horse, the cavalry attack on Beersheba, is sort of famous incident. But I hadn't realised that there are actually quite a few battles in the Middle East where cavalry came into its own, unlike on the Western Front, where cavalry were bogged down in the mud and the wire and so on. In the Middle East, there were at least 3 battles where there were successful cavalry charges against well-defended trenchwork positions and redoubts, fortified with machine guns and massed rifle fire. And the kind of impression is that the cavalry attack succeeded because the defenders weren't able to kind of constantly re-sight their rifles and machine guns to get the range accurately, because the cavalry approached them so rapidly. And then, of course, the sort of fear factor kicks in when you see the sort of terrifying charge coming towards you. So you begin to fumble, with your rifle sights and so on anyway. And then the next thing you know, the cavalry are upon you. So yeah, that was an interesting insight. But this book is full of really kind of descriptive detail, as well as being very kind of clever kind of analysis of the war, and as it says here, provocative as well. I mean, he doesn't hold back in terms of giving his own kind of opinions and so on. It's really, I haven't finished it yet, but yeah, really good book. But yeah, not but and what I wanted to really kind of do is just ramble and chat in general, because I haven't. I have been painting a lot of figures, but I don't like to show half painted figures and so on. I'm always a bit kind of conscious of my my work until it's complete. I'm often kind of embarrassed about it. But yeah, what I've been doing at the moment is kind of trying to concentrate on one thing rather than my usual habit of having 4 projects on the go. What I'm trying to do is clear my workbench of all those projects, and then just try and maybe just do one thing at a time for the time being. That's come about partly because of the change in all our circumstances, that rather than do a little bit on one thing and then move on to another and so on, I want to try and use the time to get things completed and see some kind of progress in my work. So I've actually been painting some more 15mm Blue Moon figures for the Peter Pig's rules, the Western rules. So I've been painting up some mounted US cavalry, which are coming along quite nicely, but I'm not going to show them to you today. But what I wanted to do was to show you, like everyone else, I've been buying up additional kind of purchases in lieu of being able to spend at the salute, which was due to come up in a couple of weeks' time. I've bought some more figures for that. Not very much to show you, but these are the dismounted version of the mounted cavalry. 30 figures in there, and in a way they are just a necessary kind of addition to the army, really. They won't kind of increase its size, because you have to be able to represent mounted and dismounted. So these are just the dismounted version of those. But I'm going to need some terrain as well. So I also got these rather nice Indian teepees, which I'm looking forward to painting up. One thing that has struck me, though, I don't want to get too kind of not depressive, but too kind of convoluted in my ramble. But observing kind of events from my own kind of perspective, I have kind of been watching things in a kind of fascinated horror, because if you've put up with a lot of my remarks in the past, you may know that I'm kind of very absorbed by complexity theory. And the current kind of coronavirus crisis is a classic, absolutely classic example of an extreme event that can happen, and can't be predicted as such. It can't be, but it can be anticipated in complexity theory. But this in itself, purchasing these figures, is another example about how things can alter, behavior can alter, but then have a kind of itself have a knock-on effect in terms of complex organizations and complex societies. Because what's actually happening, I've noticed a lot of people are doing it. They're buying up their supplies. It occurred to me the effect that may actually be having is that we're now this isn't essential. These aren't essential, but there's going to be an awful lot of people buying DVDs. I've done it myself. I'm actually going back to the Lawrence of Arabia thing. I sent off for a DVD of The Light Horseman. Buying up figures. It means people are being obliged to go into work to manufacture those figures, to package them, to post them, and then you've got people delivering them. I mean, these were handed to me by my postman, and all he could do was turn his sort of face away from me so that we weren't breathing into one another's faces, but we did come well within the 2 metre statutory distance in order for him to be able to hand those over to me, because he couldn't get them through the letterbox. It is putting people at kind of an increased unnecessary risk in a way. So it's an example about how trying to manage and lay down new rules for contingencies actually results in kind of unexpected consequences, unanticipated, and sometimes the opposite kind of effect to what you're trying to achieve. Because if we're all doing that now, rather than all turning up at Excel, which, when you think about it, is horrendous. Those of you who have been to Salute and know the Excel Centre, I mean, it can take you a good 20 minutes, maybe longer than that, to walk from one end of that foyer to the other. Because at one end of it, there's the Custom House, Docklands Light Railway Station, and I forget the name of the one at the other end. But it's a good 20-minute, half-hour walk, and all of that now is being converted into hospital, living accommodation for the staff, mortuaries, unfortunately, all that kind of thing. It just gives you an impression of the scale and the effect of this virus, and yet at the same time, the actual number of serious cases is kind of quite small in terms of the overall population as a whole. But it's the links and the interaction of all these different kind of complex organisms and societies and so on, all interacting, and the interconnectivity of things. So rather than get too kind of convoluted and depressive about that, I thought I'd show you a little clip from the television that I recorded a long time ago, and it struck me as a brilliant, but also kind of an amusing, in a way, image of how complexity theory can actually operate. So what it is, I'm afraid, I had it on my DVD recorder, which has got a hard drive, and I need in order to transfer it to my laptop, I need to record it onto a DVD and then download it onto my laptop. And unfortunately, I'm out of blank DVDs, and rather than send off and do the same thing again, send off to get some delivered, I thought all I'd do is point my camcorder at the TV screen and record it that way, and then show it to you. So the image quality is not very good. There's a rastering effect and so on. But what I want you to imagine, so hopefully now I will have put up an image, a still frame of the beginning of this sequence, and it's of a warehouse. And what I want you to imagine is that warehouse is a complex organisation. It's been organised in such a way that there are different products on different shelves and so on, and there are workers in there who are working in a set way, obeying certain rules. The stacks have been placed at certain distances apart, and so on. Everything has been organised and is obeying certain local rules, but the whole warehouse is joined together. It's linked in various ways. It's linked by those rules, but it's linked by numerical laws and so on, of physics, of gravity, of distances apart, of various things and so on. And in the course of events, accidents will happen in that warehouse. They're inevitable. Someone will drop a box, someone will slip on the floor. That will go on. There'll be regular occurrences, and there'll be multiple types of that occurrence going on. Less frequently, you'll get more serious accidents where someone will be have their foot run over by a forklift truck and break a bone in their foot or something like that. They won't be so common, but they will occur. Inevitably, they will occur once in a while. And then less frequently than that, you might get an even greater calamity, like a fire that takes hold and burns the entire warehouse down. Chances of that happening are very remote, but there is a possibility. And you have to kind of allow for that in anticipating what is going to happen in 10 years time, 20 years time, 50 years time, and so on. Same goes for so many other types of organism. You could live in Naples on the edge of Mount Vesuvius, and at some point in the future, maybe in 200 or 300 years' time, Vesuvius is going to erupt again, and there could be a catastrophe just as great as happened 2,000 years ago when it erupted and buried Pompeii and Herculaneum. But the inhabitants of Naples live with that. They live in the knowledge that there is that possibility. The same goes for this warehouse. So I'll just run this little clip. It was on a comedy show, so it is amusing in itself, but I think it's a really, really good and hopefully light-hearted kind of demonstration of how complexity works. So here we go. Right, yeah. Hope you enjoyed that. It's quite incredible. Everything linked together like dominoes. So it's sort of like a domino effect. One thing knocks over another and another, but you just wouldn't expect that to happen. And yet everything was placed. The warehouse was organised quite well. It was obviously, the spacing was designed to be safe and so on. And that accident happened despite it all, despite the managerial's best intentions. But I want to talk a little bit more about connectivity and just how it seems to affect me. I don't know. I sit here in isolation most of the time anyway, regardless of whether there's a virus raging outside the doors or not. But I do tend to kind of like look on things with a very kind of cynical mindset, because I'm just like that. But one of the things that you may be aware of is that I've had a bit of a rough time recently in terms of a family crisis that's been going on, and one of the kind of painful tasks I had to perform back in February was clearing out my mother's flat. It very much against her will and without her consent. But I came across a lot of photographs that were taken by my father or by his colleagues and so on when he was in the army. I've got a scan of this, so I won't zoom in. I'll put a scanned version of this up on the screen while I'm talking. Yeah, so they date back to pre-war, 1938, and during the kind of early years of the war. So they go from 1938 up until about 1943. Some of them are just sort of standard kind of photos like this. Others are a little bit less professional, as it were. They're sort of snapshots and hastily taken groups of soldiers and so on, including my father. Some of them including my father. So, you know, some of them are kind of postcards that were printed. They were taken in studios and printed onto postcards for people to send home. So there's even some that are quite, you know, sort of neatly designed and professionally printed with pictures of the pyramids, because they were in Egypt at that time, and so on, and sent home as Christmas cards and such like. I found it really fascinating going through them. I always knew they existed, but my father didn't really talk very much about them, and I didn't really I didn't really know what they were of, who they were of, and so on, or where they were taken. But this gets me to my point about connectivity and how weird, you know, you know how much I'm probably fascinated by coincidences and so on as well. To get back to my trip to Jordan, about a week after I'd taken these photographs home from my mother's flat and I was looking through them, I got a list of I got the brochure, the sort of travel information for the tour, and at that point some countries were beginning to close down, so holidays in Italy and so on were off the cards, but Jordan still had its borders open, so it's still going to go ahead. And there was a list of all the participants in the tour. Only 16 people on the tour, including myself. Okay, and all these faces in all these photographs. I was going to make a separate video about these photographs, so I won't show them all to you now. But there are dozens of photos. Don't know who any of these people are, but there was only one person who I've known my father talk about, and that was a conversation that I had with him that was provoked by some really kind of exceptional circumstances. But anyway, he told me about one particular person that he had served with, and how much he admired this person. And on the tour is the son of that person. So what are the chances of that happening? That two people out of, you know, in those 16 people are the sons of two people who fought alongside one another in the Second World War. It's quite absolutely remarkable. I won't give you names or anything like that because it's probably infringing on data protection and all that kind of thing. Just to point out that incredible coincidence. And I've been in touch with this particular person and we've been exchanging a few emails. But these pictures reminded me a lot of the pictures in this book here, which is a pictorial history of my father's regiment, the King's Own Royal Regiment, from 1680 to 1980. The kind of the pictures of the interwar years and the Second World War are a lot more. They're much better quality and so on, but they do remind me a lot of some of the pictures that I've got, now. But this particular person that I was in contact with suggested that I get in touch with the regimental museum, because they might be interested in obtaining copies of the photos that I've got. And I emailed them and didn't hear back, and thought that I wasn't going to, that maybe they weren't attending the office so much because of the virus, and they might get in touch later or anything. But I heard back from them yesterday. The curator of the museum, a chap called Peter Donnelly, and he said that yes, they didn't have many images of the 2nd Battalion, so they would be interested in copies. So I was kind of sending them to him yesterday. He was kind of commenting on them as they were coming across to him, and he said now that he's going to go through them all and try and make out what he can, and try. I've been trying to put them in chronological order and identify where they were taken. Some of them are kind of fairly obvious from the what the date is, from the type of clothing that they're wearing. They stopped wearing these kind of fatigues called goonskins about 1940. That can you can place them in that respect. Some of them are clearly in kind of tropical surroundings, so that they were probably taken in Ceylon or India prior to the Chindit campaign. But yeah, I just thought that it was yet another example about how interconnected the world is. Which is the spread of the virus is a prime example of that. But just the fact that even like, how long has it been since the war? Like 70 years on from the war now. 70 or 80, isn't it? Yeah, 80 years on from these events, and two people, potentially, it's not going to happen now, but potentially would have shared a space, who were both direct sons of two people who shared all that turmoil and crisis 80 years ago. So that's more or less my update. I thought I'd just show you as well. I haven't got many sources for painting the US cavalry, but what I've been relying on mainly, inevitably, are the Osprey books. So I've got the US Cavalry of the Plains, which has got one or two plates from the kind of period of about 1876 and Little Bighorn. I've also got this book, campaign series book from Osprey, specifically about the Little Bighorn, and there's one picture in here of which is quite good, of a mounted cavalryman from the 7th Cavalry, and a lot of the figures are actually that they are wearing these grey flannel shirts rather than the blue tunics. About 2/3 of them have got their sleeves rolled up, so they seem to me to be clearly being portrayed in grey flannel, which was kind of a bit of a disappointment in a way, because I would have preferred to have had a lot of them in blue. But that does seem to be the sort of standard appearance of the cavalryman. So that's how I'm painting them up. But the other thing that I kind of resort to in at times when I don't have much source material is I think I've shown you these before, the old Military Illustrated magazines. Now I've got these. They started up, I think the first edition was in 1984, and they went out of print, stopped printing them, I don't know, about 10 years ago maybe. I've got every single issue, and I've always found them a really valuable resource, but the problem with them is that they, like the wargaming magazines, they never used to come out with a kind of comprehensive index to allow you to, if you were trying to find an article on a particular subject, to sort of fish that out and go straight to. So you have to go looking up at my shelves now. I don't know how many binders I've got. There must be a good, I don't know, 100, maybe not 100. Yeah, maybe about 50 binders. But I did manage to find this article about the Battle of the Little Bighorn, and it's asking the question whether Custer was actually outgunned at the Little Bighorn, and the Indians were actually, or the Native Americans were actually armed with superior armament, like repeating rifles, where the cavalry had single shot weapons. But anyway, that's beside the point. But it's got this very nice illustration in here that I've been referring to as well, and you can probably make out on here that a lot of the cavalrymen are actually wearing grey flannel rather than these blue tunics, so seems to kind of match the historical reality, so I can go along with that. Thing I did notice, which seems to be a bit curious, is the way they're wearing their hats. They almost look like sort of 18th, 19th century bicorns, the way they've kind of folded them up. I never noticed that before. But anyway, those three sources are what I'm mainly using to paint up my figures, and they're coming along quite nicely, so hopefully in about a week's time I'll be able to put up another video showing you those. So thanks for listening. Hope I've kept you entertained for half an hour while you paint your figures, and stay safe everyone. Try not to get too anxious about these things. I know it's hard, particularly. Oh yeah, I'll tell you one other thing before I go. Really kind of uplifting little story, I think, in these troubled times. Like everyone else, I'm having difficulty getting the sufficient amount of groceries because of shelves being depleted by people panic buying and so on, and that situation's improved a little bit now, in that my local supermarkets obviously implemented this rule of about so many people in, and then they have a big long queue outside the door. But before that actually kicked in, I was on my way home from supermarket, having made a reasonably successful foraging outing and got most of my weekly supplies in, but unfortunately they didn't have any bread. Couldn't find bread for love nor money, and I was on my way home, and one of my neighbours was just on her way to work, driving past in the car, and I've never actually spoken to her before. We've always just sort of waved and acknowledged one another's presence and so on, so I'd never spoken to her, but she actually pulled up in the car and just asked me how I was getting on, and we just had a brief kind of conversation, and I happened to mention that I'd been to the shops, and it wasn't too bad, but that they didn't have any bread, and in the course of the conversation, we were telling one another about our respective troubles and so on. That I've got all these issues going on down in Eastbourne that I can't get to now, and she told me that she had even more kind of unsettling worry, which was that her daughter has just been diagnosed with a brain tumour and is in Australia, and she can't get to her at all. So that's obviously a big worry on her mind. So we kind of wished one another well, and I went indoors, and about 2 days later she knocked on my door with a loaf of bread because she'd found one in, on her shopping trip. So despite all her worries, she was still looking out for her neighbours. I thought that was really, really nice. So kind of an example about how, we'll all get through it. So take care, everyone, anyway, and I'll see you on the next video. Probably the next one will be my completed mounted cavalry. See you then. Bye for now.